Most people who buy a chameleon lose it within the first 6 months. Not because chameleons are impossible to keep, but because nobody told them what these animals actually need. The enclosure is everything. Get it right and your chameleon thrives. Get it wrong, and no amount of feeding or supplements will save it. Let's fix that today. Chameleons are one of the most fascinating reptiles you can own. They change color, they have those incredible eyes that move independently, and watching one hunt is like seeing something out of a nature documentary. But they are also one of the most sensitive animals in the hobby, and they will not forgive a bad setup. Unlike a bearded dragon or a leopard gecko, a chameleon has very little room for error. Here is the problem most beginners run into. They treat a chameleon like any other reptile. They buy a glass tank, throw in some fake plants, put a lamp on top, and wonder why their animal stops eating, sits on the ground, or dies within a few months. Glass tanks trap humidity unevenly, they restrict airflow, and they create the exact kind of stagnant environment a chameleon cannot handle. In the wild, these animals live in trees with constant air circulation around them. Replicating that is not optional, it is survival. So let's talk about how to actually build an enclosure that works. The first thing you need is a screen enclosure, not glass. A full screen cage allows air to move through constantly, which prevents respiratory infections and keeps the humidity cycling the way it should. For most veiled chameleons, which are the most common species for beginners, you want a minimum size of 24 inches wide by 24 inches deep by 48 inches tall. Bigger is always better. Chameleons are arboreal, meaning they live up high, so vertical space matters more than floor space. Now let's talk about lighting, because this is where a lot of setups fall apart. Your chameleon needs 2 completely separate light sources. The first is a UVB bulb. This is non-negotiable. Without proper UVB exposure, chameleons cannot process calcium, and they will develop metabolic bone disease, which is as bad as it sounds. Use a linear T5HO UVB bulb that spans at least half the length of the enclosure, and replace it every 6 months even if it still looks like it is working, because the UV output drops before the visible light does. The second light source is a basking bulb. This creates a warm spot at the top of the enclosure where your chameleon can thermoregulate. For veiled chameleons, you want that basking spot to sit around 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The rest of the enclosure should be cooler, in the low to mid 70s, so the animal can move around and self-regulate its body temperature. At night, you can let the temperature drop to the low 60s minus. That is actually beneficial and mimics the natural temperature swing they experience in the wild. Humidity is the next piece of the puzzle, and it requires a little more thought. Chameleons need humidity in the range of 50 to 70% during the day, with spikes up to 100% in the morning, and at night to simulate morning mist and nighttime dew. The best way to achieve this is with an automatic misting system. You set a timer, it runs for a couple of minutes a few times a day, and your chameleon gets to drink water droplets off the leaves, which is exactly how they drink in nature. They do not use standing water bowls. If you are relying on hand misting, you need to do it multiple times a day, every single day, without exception. Speaking of plants, live plants are the difference between a good enclosure and a great one. They hold humidity, they provide cover, and they make your chameleon feel secure. Pothos, hibiscus, umbrella plants, and ficus are all popular choices. Make sure whatever you use is non-toxic and has not been treated with pesticides. Fake plants look fine, but they do not do any of the functional work that live plants do. Finally, let's talk about layout. Structure the enclosure so there are climbing branches at multiple heights. Chameleons spend most of their time elevated, and they feel stressed and exposed when they cannot get up off the ground. Use natural branches, bamboo, or cork bark to create pathways and resting spots across different levels. The goal is to give your animal plenty of options to move, bask, hide, and explore. Here is the key insight that ties all of this together. A chameleon does not just need resources. It needs choice. It needs to choose where to bask, where to cool down, where to hide, and where to drink. When your enclosure gives the animal that level of control over its own environment, stress drops dramatically. And a chameleon that is not stressed is a chameleon that eats well, grows well, and lives a long life. Everything in the setup, the airflow, the lighting gradient, the humidity cycle, the plant coverage, serves that one core idea. Most reptile keepers who struggle with chameleons are trying to simplify an animal that is not built for simplicity. Once you understand that, the whole setup starts to make sense. You are not just checking boxes. You are building a small, functional slice of the environment this animal evolved to live in. If this breakdown helped you think about your chameleon setup differently, subscribe so you do not miss the next videos in this series, We are going deeper on lighting schedules, feeding routines, and the supplementation system that actually works. And if you want to go back through any of this at your own pace, there is a full resource guide linked in the description with everything we covered today laid out clearly, so you can use it as a reference while you are building your setup. Your chameleon is counting on you to get this right. Now you know how.